thanks for joining us today for the Invest in Your PR, so investors invest in you. I'm really pleased to be part of Bristol Tech Festival, and I'm really looking forward to sharing some insights. So a little bit about me then. So I'm director at Social Tech Communications. I'm a social, we're part of a social integrated agency, and I've more than 16 years experience in PR and communications. The past 8 years I've spent working with lots of tech and digital businesses, both in agency and client side. There you can see a list of some of the tech companies I've worked with. So the likes of ID Now, which is an identity verification provider, Intuitive, which is a business intelligence dashboard provider, and they're a real mix of startups, scale-ups, and global enterprises. And a little bit about social then. So as I mentioned, we're part of Social Tech Communications is part of Social Integrated Agency, which is a full service comms consultancy. We have offices in Bristol, Manchester, Leeds, Liverpool and London. And my division, which is the Tech Communications division, is the most recent to launch. So a little bit about social then and what we do. We deliver strategy when it comes to comms and PR, full-blown campaigns. Obviously communications, this is all about storytelling, and that's what today is going to be focusing on. We look after social media for clients. We help develop branding. We look after the world of the digital. And we also offer video and photography. So a real mixed bag here at Social. So on to today's session then. So this today is all focusing around the role of PR in the investment journey. And a study was carried out last year that looked into the potential impact that media coverage had on funding for tech startups. This was carried out by two different companies called Hard Numbers and Karma. And at the end of the session, I'll share the link to that so that you can look into it in a bit more detail. But the overall trend from the data showed that there's a statistically significant correlation between the levels of media coverage that an early stage company generates and the amount of funding they receive in their next funding round. The purpose of the study, or the focus of it, was to look specifically at those businesses that were trying to secure Series B fundraising. The study grouped the increase in fundraisers into three categories. So high funding size increase, medium and low. And those companies that saw a low increase in funding averaged 146 pieces of coverage during that period. Companies who received a medium increase had generated an average of 176 pieces of coverage, and those who received a high increase generated an average of 207 pieces of coverage. So ultimately what the research showed was that allocating budget to PR and communications from an early stage is critical to achieve a high Series B fundraise. And the same can be said throughout your investment journey, whether you're seeking seed funding, Series A, Series B or more. The case studies and the companies included in the research really all demonstrated the impact that media coverage can have on business growth, and that it pays to invest in professional PR and communications. But with all that said, where do you even begin? So what exactly is PR and communications then? So the Chartered Institute of Public Relations define PR as being about your reputation, the result of what you do, what you say, and what others say about you. It's ultimately the discipline that looks after reputation with the aim of earning understanding and support and influencing opinion and behaviour. The PRCA, which is the Public Relations and Communications Association, define it quite similar, but they say it's all about the way organisations communicate with the public, how they promote themselves and how they build a positive reputation and public image. And often the media has a huge role to play in this, given the influence that they can have on different markets. So ultimately, it's about cultivating a positive reputation through lots of different channels, whether that is with the media, whether that's through social media, whether it's through events. And we mustn't forget the importance of defending reputations as well. So if there's a crisis that's looking to hit the company, it's vital that you've got a strong PR person or a strong PR plan that enables you to respond to that crisis with gusto. So what's the importance of a communication strategy then in achieving broader business objectives? So a comms strategy then is a plan of action designed to achieve a business objective. We shouldn't think of a comms strategy as being something in isolation. It should very much align with your overall business objectives. It's a route to gaining a competitive advantage. It's a way to exploit emerging possibilities. And it's your opportunity to detail how you intend to capture the attention of your target markets. I mean, whatever stage you're at in your journey, it's always going to be vital to attract customers to your business, whatever the business is that you do. But to do it, you've got to grab their attention. And in the tech sector, we know how busy it is. It's flourishing. And so you're going to be competing against many other businesses, most likely who are vying for a similar audience. Writing a communication strategy will enable you to define how you're going to deliver your business strategy. It defines what you're going to say, who you're going to say it to, and when you're going to say it. So a communication strategy will help increase awareness of your brand. It'll strengthen your competitive position. It'll help you command share of voice in your market. It'll accelerate your sales, and it'll help you keep you focused and aligned on your strategic priorities. And it'll enable you to identify the messages you need to promote, who you're targeting them at, how you're going to target them and through which channels. And it'll ultimately help build brand trust. So knowing all that, where do you begin? How do you create that communication strategy? So here we've got a typical top line overview of what a PR plan might look like and what it should include. We're going to go through these steps in more detail in the following slides. But in brief, every comms plan should have a business goal. So what is the overall business objective? And the communications objectives. What is it you want your communications to achieve? How do they relate to your overall business objectives? Strategies and tactics. How are you going to tell your story? How do you want to get your messages across? Is it through news releases, profiling, research? What are your key messages? What's your story and how does it differ? What are USPs? How are you setting yourself apart? Target audiences. Who is it you're talking to? Is it a mixture of different audiences? And if so, how are you going to tailor those messages? So is it investors, CEOs, analysts? Then think about how you're going to reach your audiences. What channels are you going to use? Is it through technology titles like TechCrunch? Is it through social media? Is it through events? Then think about your execution. What are your timelines and resources? And you're very likely to need to prioritize here. And again, having the overall sales and marketing plan at the forefront of your mind. So who are the priority sectors? Is it channel partners or is it direct to consumer? And think about what resources you have internally that can help deliver this plan. And finally, measurement. How are you going to measure success? What does it look like? Will it be an increase in social media engagement? Is it a spike in website visits? Is it behavior change? But before you begin to write your comms plan, it's important to undertake some research. By carrying out some effective analysis and research, ultimately that'll determine the success of your strategy and help you define your objectives. And it should always be backed up by research to understand your target markets and audiences as well. And you may find it'll help uncover key information to help guide and shape your approach. So some key considerations then at the research stage. It's a great time to undertake a SWOT analysis. So you really think deeply about your strengths and weaknesses, your opportunities and threats. So if we use an example, let's say you've just launched an e-health app aimed at workforce mental health. Your strength might be that you've been recognised by Gartner and TechCrunch as a one to watch. Your weakness might be that you don't currently have the internal resource to accelerate your growth plans. Your opportunity might be that there aren't currently any direct competitors in your market, and your threat might be emerging competitors. Think about all of those things and map out a SWOT analysis, and that will really, really help deliver a much stronger communications plan. Think about previous projects you've worked on, what lessons can be learned from there, and also look at what your peers and competitors are doing and perhaps learn from what they're doing there. Have a look over past media coverage and event attendance. What's worked well, what hasn't? Focus on those things. And if possible, and if budget allows, try and do some focus group research and some research amongst your key audiences and stakeholders to really understand their pain points, their challenges, and the kind of information that they would find useful to receive from you. At the research stage, it's also important to spend time getting to know your individual audiences, and stakeholder mapping is a great tool for listing everyone you want to reach and influence. Your communication strategy should identify the key audiences with whom you need to communicate to achieve your business objectives. Consider what messaging is most likely to resonate with your different target audiences and how best to reach them. For example, speaking to investors or regulators will require a very different approach to engaging with channel partners or customers. And there we've got an example of what some stakeholder mapping might look like. So the next step then is to think about your objectives. What are your business goals, and how do you want your communications and PR to help you achieve them? I'm sure many of you have heard of the SMART acronym, so being specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. So what is it you want to do? Define your goals clearly. Measurable, how will you know when you've done it? Can you track the progress and measure the outcome? Achievable, can you accomplish it? Is it reasonable to accomplish the goal you're setting for yourself? Relevant, is it worthwhile? Is it worthwhile, and will it help meet your overall needs? And when do you want to accomplish it? A time frame should always be included, whether that's within a month, within a financial year. It'll really help you keep on track and improve time management. And your SMART objectives should be focused on your outcomes, so the end result, rather than the day-to-day activity. These are the objectives by which your success is going to be measured, so it's important you get these bits right. So if we look at then some examples of what a business objective for an education technology firm might be. So it could be that they want to increase turnover by 15%, they want to attract £250,000 investment for growth, and they want to increase market share by 25%. So if we translate that into a set of communications objectives, what might that look like? So increase turnover by 15%. The communication objective might be to raise awareness of the product amongst higher and further education establishments. Attracting 250 grand investment for growth. The communication objective for that might be to raise awareness of the brand amongst the investor community. And to increase market share by 25%. The communication objective to help achieve that might be to launch a channel partner program. So once you've decided on your objectives, it's time to think about your audiences, and this is where your stakeholder mapping and audience research really comes into play. So think about who you need to reach in order to meet your business and communications objectives. Who are they? How can you help them, and what problems can your tech or digital solution solve for them? And what's the best way to reach them? It's important to be as specific as possible. So ask yourself which businesses, which investors, which channel partners, and which people within these organisations, who are the decision makers? And how can you be helpful and useful to those important audiences? And again, this will require different sorts of messaging depending on the audience. So you've established who your key audiences are to help achieve your objectives. It's now time to think about your key messages. So these are the core messages that you want your target audience to hear and remember. So think about what messages do you want to communicate about your brand, your product, or your service? What makes you different from your competitors? Think also about your audience. What needs can you meet, and what language do they use? For example, if you're talking to a group of tech analysts who use technical language every day, then that's fine. But if your audience is also higher education establishments, then it's probably best to stick to plain English to ensure your messages are understood. We recommend picking 3 to 5 key messages that are core to your organisation, product or service and what you want your audience to know, and use them consistently. Remember to consider including benefits for your audiences. This is what's going to sell your product rather than the features. So if we use software as an example, the feature might be that it has an advanced application that can handle multiple users concurrently, but that isn't necessarily what's going to sell your product to the user. So the benefit would be a state-of-the-art application that can connect multiple users to enhance cost savings, control and efficiency. The key here is to keep them simple and jargon-free and support them with facts. So a few examples here then. XX is the UK's first mental health app designed specifically for students. What is the proof? What's the evidence? Well, it was first to market, and there's only been one competitor which launched 2 years later. The second key message might be XX applies technological innovation to anticipate and respond to customer needs. What's the evidence? Well, it uses leading AI technologies within the platform, and it has a senior technical R&D program in place. And the third key message might be XX meets the highest standards of security. And the proof? Well, it adheres to the latest regulations and compliance requirements. So they're just a few examples. And once you've put down in writing what you think your key messages are, check them over to ensure that they're strong. So again, ask yourself, do they align with our organisational mission, our business plans and goals and strategy? Are they unique to your firm, or can they be applied to your competitors? If so, I'd say go back to the drawing board and find a USP and choose that one. When you read it out loud, do they sound convincing and credible? Could you simplify or tighten the wording, remembering to keep it as jargon-free as possible? And where's the evidence? Ensure that you're supplying the evidence to back up what you're saying. So you've nailed your key messages. It's now time to think about how you're going to communicate those messages to your target audiences. There are so many communications tools out there that it really does make things quite difficult when you have a budget, and it's understanding what will work best for each audience. And again, this is where your stakeholder research and mapping is really important. There's no point planning your strategy on a hunch. Be clear on how your audience would like to consume your messages and where they hang out. For example, if you're in health tech, consider writing a feature for a particular trade publication read by your audience, such as digital health, rather than setting your sights on a national broadsheet. And a few examples of tactics and activities that we do here regularly for our clients include news releases, thought leadership, profiling of key spokespeople like the CEO or the CFO, and entering awards. There's also social media, events, so roundtables, webinars, conferences, and that can be hosting them or presenting them, and we'll talk about that a bit later. There's also high value content, so things like white papers and reports, and case studies are a real great selling tool for your sales team, your marketing team, as well as for your PR. Think about your internal audiences as well. Make sure that everyone's on board with the message. And then we've also got direct marketing and advertising, but we're not really going to touch on those in today's session. So now it's time to think about the channels of communication, and again, be guided by your research and measure it. The challenge for PR teams today is identifying the channels that are going to make the most sense to each individual group of stakeholders. So understanding your audience is critical. So here again, we've got some examples of what those channels might be. So through the media, whether that's trade press like TechCrunch and CIO, vertical sector, so think about the sectors that you're targeting. So if you're an education technology business, then there's a title called education technology. If you're health tech, there's titles such as digital health. Think also about the local, national and international press. Obviously, we've got online and print, and TV and radio via broadcast media. But then we've also got things like social media. And again, think about the channels. This isn't a vanity project. You don't need to have Facebook presence necessarily if your audiences or the people you're trying to reach wouldn't look for you there. Lobbying. Are there any government lobby groups that you could get involved with? Any special membership groups or steering groups that align with your beliefs? Think about your marketing. So your brand, your website, your brochures, your videos, are they all aligned? And again, think about events, public speaking, undertaking tours. Ultimately, you're going to have to find an approach that suits your budget, because everything requires cost, comes with a cost these days. And again, the available resources you have internally. So again, this is why it's vital to focus on the areas that are really going to deliver for you and where you can find your audiences. So the next step then is how much is this going to cost? Think about your internal team. So what activity can they deliver? Where do they have relevant expertise? And then think about where you might need outsourced support. Map what can be realistically done with your resources and identify the gaps that you need support for. So if you're an IT support firm looking to target businesses across the UK and you've identified that business titles such as Forbes and Director are read by your audiences, what next? Have you got the internal resource able to create interesting and insightful copy and content that would land in these publications and that would engage your audience? If not, perhaps that's where you need to consider outsourcing some of that work. And then think about how much that support's going to cost. When do you need it? And the final step then is to measure that success. So what does good look like? And this, it really does need to link back to your objectives. Set out some measurements by which your work can be evaluated and make this a continuous process, iterating that approach as you go. A comm strategy isn't set in stone. It's very much a fluid document, and always consider it that way. Do more of what works well and less of what's not working well. Don't be afraid to make changes as you go. So ask yourself, did the campaign succeed? Did you change understanding, opinion, or behaviour? And how is that measured? Is it quantitative? So are you organising an event? So could we put the value against how many people attend? Is it an increase in website visitors? Perhaps it's column inches in the press. And then we've got qualitative. So this might be feedback forms from holding focus groups. And it could be the level of key message of yours that's hitting your tier 1 media. So to summarise then, step 1, research and insights. Understand your market, your audiences, your stakeholders, and how they consume information. Step 2, set your objectives. What is it you're trying to achieve? Step 3, think about your stakeholders and audiences. Who do you need to reach in order to meet your business objectives? Your key messages. What is it you're saying? What is it that stands you apart? Tactics and activities. What day-to-day activities are going to deliver your communications objectives? Channels. How will you connect your messages with your audience? How are you going to reach them? Plan and resources. When are things going to happen and how much resource will you need internally and externally? And finally, measuring success. How will you know what good looks like? And to just run through a quick checklist then, if you ask yourselves these questions and you've covered each of these points, then the chances are you've got a pretty good communications plan as a starting point. So have you got an introduction, a summary of the project? Have you got your business objectives in there? And have you got the corresponding communications objectives? Are your key audiences, messages and channels mapped out? Have you got your activities and tactics? Have you put down your resources? So who's going to do the work, when, and how is it going to be funded? And what is your means of evaluation? So when we think about then what does good PR and communications look like, and this sort of links back to measurement really and evaluation, the key questions to ask yourself here are, what can you create that will offer value for your market, your sector, or your key audiences How can you connect with the key stakeholders in your market in order to create a community? Ultimately, that's what good PR and communications should look like. And literally, this is what good PR and communications looks like. So when we talked about activities day to day, this is the stuff, the bread and butter stuff that your PR teams would be working on. So thought leadership and opinion pieces, these are great if you want to position yourself or your company as an authority on a specific issue or sector. It helps build your credibility with both your target markets as well as the sector media, with the ultimate goal of positioning you as the go-to company when it comes to those challenges or opportunities. And for investors, if they can see that you are positioning yourself as an expert and that people within the industry see you that way, then that's only ever going to help that funding journey. So as an example, I recently worked with an identity verification software provider, and they were really keen to reach the conveyancing market. So we developed a thought leadership campaign focused around the prop tech space, which enabled us to position the UK director as an expert in this market. And as a result, it really gave him kudos when approaching potential customers in that space. So news, regularly sending out information and updates to your target audience is a real important part of a PR plan. So this might be announcing your latest funding round, if you've got new hires or appointments. Perhaps you've built a corporate partnership with a major organisation. It might also be acquisitions or your latest financials or business growth story. But it's a really great way to drip feed information through to audiences, and ultimately that will help that investment journey too. So events and roundtables are great. They're a great way to bring sector influencers, potential customers or existing clients together to discuss the topics that are important to you or them at that time. It really helps open up healthy debate, and it can help build or extend existing relationships. From a content perspective, it really helps provide material to develop a range of collateral as well, whether that be press releases, reports, white papers, interviews. There's a real mix of things that you can achieve content-wise from an event. So as I mentioned earlier, there's hosted events or events you attend, both of which present different opportunities. For events you attend, such as conferences or exhibitions like this one, we'd recommend exploring opportunities to become a keynote speaker or to sit on a panel, and that will really amplify your voice and investment. For a hosted event, the bonus with that is that you're able to control the agenda, the attendee list, and the themes or topics, but it often requires significant time and cost investment. That said, they can deliver large returns, so it's often worth giving some serious consideration to if there's budget. So, for example, when I worked as a PR and comms manager at Intuitive Business Intelligence, we held regular customer insight events. These were small, intimate events where an Intuitive customer would present their case study of the impact of business intelligence software, supported by the Intuitive team, to outline the latest updates and use cases. Those in attendance would have been carefully selected from the sales pipeline, often those who were further down the funnel or considered a warm to hot lead. And these events were always well attended and often resulted in confirmed sales. Interviews are brilliant if you want to profile senior people within the team, within the company, and they're often able to deliver high value quality coverage. It also enables your spokespeople to build important relationships with influential journalists. So those interviews, a few months later, if you've had a really, really great interview with a key journalist, and then they're writing about a subject that they've talked to you about, then the chances are they'll get back in touch and they'll start coming to you for those insights. The important thing here, though, is to make sure your spokespeople are sufficiently media trained. There are lots of do's and don'ts when it comes to speaking with the media, from not getting drawn into controversial discussion, not feeling the need to fill in those awkward silences that they purposely put in there to encourage that. So media training would be very, very important if interviews were a route you wanted to take, but very, very valuable. Often it's a journalist or an ex-journalist who holds those media training days, and a lot of insights can be gleaned from them. So influential partnerships are a brilliant way to align your thoughts, values and visions and reach new audiences. So part of the work that we did with Advanced, which is the UK's third largest software and services provider, involved establishing a really strong relationship with the Confederation of British Industry. The reason being was that Advanced wanted to position itself as a leading supporter and cheerleader in the British business landscape. So by partnering with the CBI, Advanced became recognised as an influential British business and a partner to British businesses. And Gordon Wilson, the CEO, became a popular media spokesperson who the journalists and the media came to look for comment on the issues and challenges facing businesses in relation to technology and digitalisation. So think again about the sector that you're in, the sectors that you want to target, your audiences, what partnerships that can you create and build that will help amplify your voice and align your thoughts with influential organisations. Now, research reports are really brilliant if you want to get some stats or some facts and figures together. It's a great way to deliver fresh insights that will appeal to the media as well as your target audiences. Journalists absolutely love facts and figures, and original research that uncovers something new, it will always be welcomed by the media. And it can also deliver multiple pieces of high quality coverage as well. Whether that be trends reports like the one I've got up here that we did with Advanced, whether that be a white paper. There's a whole mix of different content that can be created following some research. We always recommend an independent research agency carry out the research, and often there's a minimum number of respondents that journalists will require to make it newsworthy, depending on the sector. So if it's general consumer research, so you're just going out to Joe Public, often journalists and the media would expect 1,000 respondents. If it's a more of a B2B research paper, then you could lower that to maybe 300 to 500. But obviously that all comes with a cost. So again, budget's important here. But the brilliant thing with a report is that there's longevity that can come from it. So if you theme the research, you can often announce findings over the course of a few months, providing they're all still timely. And because you'll own the content and the report, you can use it across your broader marketing and sales efforts. So you could put it out as an email marketing campaign with the findings, or if you produce a white paper at the end of the research, you could add that as gated content to your website, which will enable you to data capture those people that want to download it. So that brings the very quick session to a close. What I've got here is some resources. So we've got the research report that I highlighted at the start of the presentation that was carried out by Hard Numbers and Karma. And then the PR Academy is a great place to get insights and help and templates, and they will give you really strong ideas on how to develop them in more detail. So I'd really encourage you to take a look at their website. And then Influence Online as well. So just gives you some ideas when you're thinking about PR strategy and planning and how you go about that. So I'll now take any questions. I'm just going to stop sharing my screen. So yes, thanks for your time, everybody. I don't know if there were any questions or anything that anybody would like to ask. I'd welcome any feedback, or failing that, you can find me on LinkedIn. So I'm Sarah Donnelly and I'm Director at Social Tech Communications, which is part of Social Integrated Agency. And you will find my contact details on there. Alternatively, my email address is sarah.donnelly@social.co.uk. I'll post that into the comment box as well for you. But I really hope that you found that useful. It was a very quick run through, but I appreciate that there was a lot to take in.